It's the salary trap. I need to tell you something that took me 3 countries, 7 years, and one very sobering spreadsheet to fully understand. I've lived in Germany, France, the United Kingdom. And in every single one of those countries, I heard the same thing. From governments, financial advisors, newspaper headlines, well-meaning colleagues over lunch. Don't worry, inflation is coming down, things are stabilizing, the worst is behind us. Every time, I opened my banking app, and my account told a completely different story. So today I'm going to show you what that story actually says, not the headline version, the kitchen table version. The one you feel at the end of every month when the numbers just don't add up. I'll show you the data behind what's happening to European households right now. I'll share what I learned living inside 3 different financial systems. And I'll give you 5 strategies that are quietly working for people who've stopped waiting for governments to fix this and started fixing it themselves. But first, you need to understand how deep this actually goes, because the number everyone quotes is designed to make you feel better than you should. Part 1. The illusion. Here's the sentence you've heard 100 times in the last 18 months. Inflation is finally coming down. And it's technically true. The current rate of price increases has slowed. But hear this carefully, because it's the single most important distinction in personal finance right now. Lower inflation does not mean lower prices. It means prices are rising more slowly than before. Everything that doubled, everything that jumped 30 or 40% during the crisis, it didn't come back down. It locked in at the new level, and your salary, in most cases, hasn't caught up. That gap between what things cost and what you earn, that's the real crisis. Economists call it the wage illusion. Your payslip says more, but you're buying less. And saving even less than that. Here's what that looks like in real numbers. 93% of Europeans say they're seriously worried about making ends meet, even in 2026, after the peak of the inflation surge. 1 in 3 Europeans expects their standard of living to fall over the next 5 years, not stay the same, fall. 40% of young Europeans rank rising prices as a top personal concern, ahead of unemployment, ahead of security. When I lived in Berlin, I watched this happen in real time. People earning more than they ever had and not saving less, and not because they were reckless, because the cost structure of their life had shifted upward and no pay rise had followed. Same pattern in Paris, worse in London. There are 4 categories where this is hitting hardest and most invisibly. I call them the 4 silent drains. At Drain 1, housing. Since 2010, average EU rents rose 27.8% overall, but that average hides the real story. Estonia up 220%, Lithuania up 784%, Ireland up 115%. Average EU house prices rose 55.4%. More than double income growth over the same period. Nearly 1 in 10 EU households now spends more than 40% of their disposable income on housing alone. That's the official threshold for housing cost overburden. That's not a fringe number, that's tens of millions of households. Drain 2, food. Food inflation isn't making headlines anymore. But the prices at your supermarket haven't reversed, they've stabilized at the higher level. The weekly shop that used to cost $70, it's $95 now. And $95 is the new normal. The shock has been absorbed, the cost has not. Drain 3, energy. UK household energy bills are 52% higher than their pre-pandemic level as of 2025. Energy markets have stabilized but at a structurally higher base. Your winter bills are not going back to where they were, regardless of what the market does. Drain 4, subscriptions. The average European household is paying for 4 to 7 recurring digital subscriptions and actively using fewer than half. That's anywhere from 50 to 150 a month, leaving your account in fragments too small to notice, but too large to ignore when you add them up. Part 2. What 3 countries taught me. I want to step back from the data and give you something more useful than statistics. Pattern recognition. Having watched this up close in 3 different countries, here's what I actually learned. Germany, the efficiency trap. Germany taught me that efficiency is not the same as freedom. The budgeting culture is excellent. Public transport saves real money. The social safety net is genuinely world-class. But Berlin has changed almost beyond recognition in a decade. Rents that were manageable for young professionals in 2015 became unmanageable by 2023. Germany's local rent index, the Mietspiegel, exists to protect tenants. But many landlords have found ways around it, and the index itself has risen. The lesson? Systems matter. Know your legal rights. A tenant in Germany who understands the law is infinitely better protected than one who doesn't, but don't assume the system will protect you automatically. France. The beautiful budget. France showed me what a social contract actually looks like when it functions. Healthcare largely free at point of use, 35-hour weeks enforced by law, 5 weeks of paid leave guaranteed, a real culture of protecting personal time. And yet, Paris. Paris has become an exercise in financial endurance for anyone without a high salary or a rent-controlled lease. The IRL caps rent increases worse, but the base rents are already so high that the cap barely helps new renters. The lesson, the quality of life dividend from social infrastructure is real and enormous, but it doesn't solve the housing crisis. Outside Paris, Lyon, Bordeaux, Montpellier, the equation is dramatically better. The UK, the shock absorber that broke. The UK taught me the cost of a social contract that's been quietly dismantled over decades. The NHS, still extraordinary. The culture, unmatched. London's energy, addictive. But UK housing is one of the most dysfunctional markets in the developed world. Rents in some areas have risen more than 100% since 2010. Wages haven't. And the UK took the hardest energy price hit on household spending power across all of Western Europe. The lesson: when systems fail, you pay out of pocket. The UK has turned personal financial literacy into a survival skill rather than a bonus. Across all 3 countries, I noticed one consistent pattern. The people navigating this well were not at the highest earners. They were the most intentional. They had made deliberate choices where they lived, how they spent, what they saved, what they invested in. They had stopped waiting for the system to catch up. They had started engineering their own stability. That's what the next section is about. Part 3, the 5, and the moves that actually work. Move 1. Map the invisible. The most powerful financial action you can take in 2026 costs nothing and takes 90 minutes. Open your bank statement, go back 3 months. Categorize every outgoing into 3 buckets. Fixed essentials: rent, utilities, insurance, transport passes, things you can't change this month. Variable essentials: groceries, fuel, medication, things you can influence with behavior. Discretionary: subscriptions, dining, impulse purchases, things you can cut. Most people are genuinely surprised by what they find in bucket 3. Not because they're reckless, but because modern consumer economics is engineered to make spending invisible. Small amounts, recurring charges, contactless taps. Your brain doesn't feel the $9.99 the way it would feel handing over a $10 note, but your account does. This exercise gives you your real number. Not what you think you spend, but what you actually spend. You cannot fix what you cannot see. The average European household has 4 to 7 active subscriptions, and uses fewer than half regularly. Cancelling just 3 unused subscriptions at $10 each saves to $360 a year. Move 2. Attack your biggest line item. In almost every European household, the biggest single cost is housing. Most people treat it as fixed. It often isn't. Germany. Pull the local Mietspiegel for your area and apartment type. If your rent exceeds the index, you have legal grounds to contest an increase. Many landlords count on tenants not knowing this. France. Landlords are legally restricted from raising rent beyond the indice de référence des loyers. If they've exceeded it, they owe you the difference. That is your legal right. Check your tenancy type. A Section 13 notice has a specific legal process. If your landlord hasn't followed it correctly, the increase may not be enforceable. In all countries, negotiate proactively. A tenant with a clean payment history is worth more to a landlord than an empty flat. Have the conversation. Most landlords prefer a reliable tenant at slightly reduced rent over the risk of reletting. If you can't reduce your housing cost, reduce what housing costs you. A 2°C reduction in your thermostat can cut heating bills by up to 10%. Switching energy provider, where competition is permitted, can save $200 to $400 annually. Move 3. The grocery restructure. Food prices have stabilized. A 30 to 40% above 3 years ago. They are not coming back down. What you can do is restructure how and where you shop. Own brand switch. On staples like pasta, rice, oil, tinned goods, dairy, independent blind tests consistently show negligible quality difference between own brand and named products. Price difference, typically 25 to 40%. Midweek shopping. Tuesday to Thursday, supermarkets discount items near sell-by date at 30 to 50% off. This is the single fastest grocery saving available. Weekly markets. In virtually every French, Spanish, Italian, and many German and UK cities, a Wednesday or Saturday market will consistently undercut a supermarket on fresh produce by 15 to 25%. Batch cooking. Eliminate the "I'm tired, I'll just order something" decision. That decision costs the average European household $120 to $180 extra per month in delivery fees and impulse orders. Move 4. Build the buffer before you invest. I'll say something that contradicts most finance content. Before you invest a single euro, build an emergency fund. 3 months of essential living expenses, liquid, accessible, in a separate account. In a 2025 survey, 47% of Gen Z and 46% of millennials describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Similar patterns across Germany, France, and the UK. Here's why this matters more than people realize. Without a buffer, every unexpected expense, car repair, medical bill, broken appliance, forces you into debt. And debt is expensive. Every emergency you borrow to cover makes the next one cost more. The emergency fund breaks that cycle. It converts crises into inconveniences. Start with 1 month of essentials. Not 3, 1. Make it achievable. Automate a transfer on payday before you can spend it, and use a high-yield savings account. In 2026, after the rate cycle of recent years, most European banks offer meaningful interest on instant access savings. Your buffer should be earning something while it waits. Move 5. Start investing. Even if it's 30. I know the objection you're forming right now. I can barely cover my costs. How am I supposed to invest? I've been in that position. In all 3 countries, at different points, I've sat with a spreadsheet and thought, there's nothing left. But here's the counterintuitive truth. The worse the cost of living environment, the more important long-term wealth building becomes. Because inflation doesn't just erode your spending power today, it erodes the value of money sitting idle in a current account every single month. The only mechanism that has historically outpaced inflation over long periods is investment, not savings accounts alone, not property alone. Broad market investment. Look into your country's tax-advantaged accounts: UK, ISA, France, P, Germany, ETF, Sparplan, Netherlands, Beleggingsrekening. These allow investment income to grow with preferential or zero tax treatment. Start with a low-cost global index ETF, something tracking the broad world economy, not individual stocks or sectors. The annualized historical return of global equity index funds over 20-year periods has typically been 6 to 9%. Flashstavkis a month, invested consistently at a 7% historical average, becomes roughly $1,500 over 20 years. Not life-changing on its own, but a meaningful cushion built from almost nothing. Time in the market, not timing the market. The best day to start was a decade ago. The second best day is today. Outro. The honest verdict. I want to be completely honest before I close. The cost of living crisis across Europe is not over, not in Germany, not in France, not in the UK. Prices have not come back down, they've stabilized at a higher plateau. The housing market in most major European cities remains structurally broken. The European Investment Bank estimated the EU needed 2.25 million more homes in 2025 than were actually being built. No YouTube video fixes that. And I won't pretend otherwise. What these 5 moves can do, applied consistently, even imperfectly, is give you agency inside a system that is not designed with your financial well-being as its primary objective. An agency in 2026 is the rarest and most valuable financial asset available. Having lived inside 3 versions of this system, the one thing that separated the people managing well from the people struggling was not income level. It was intentionality. They knew their number, they had a buffer, they were invested, even a little. And they had stopped outsourcing their financial futures to systems they couldn't control. You can do the same, starting this week, starting today. If this video gave you one thing you didn't have before you clicked, a number, a strategy, a new way of seeing what's happening, then it's done exactly what I wanted. Subscribe. Next week, I'm breaking down how the tax systems in Germany, France, and the UK actually compare, and which one legally lets you keep the most of what you earn. The answer surprised me. It'll probably surprise you too. And drop your sound country in the comments. Tell me which of the 5 moves you're trying first. I read every comment, and if enough of you name the same country, that becomes the next dedicated video. Take care of your money, because nobody else will.